Hey guys, welcome to episode 17 of the Journey NYC podcast. My name is Anthony Luke-Akagi. I'm your host today. Today I've got a really exciting guest today. I've always been a fan of Disney, and Marvel and Star Wars. I'm a fan in general of movies, and we are so fortunate today to be able to speak to a childhood star from a Disney actual movie. Today we've got Chapman Hyatt, and we're going to be talking to him a little bit about what his career was like as a child and to what he's doing now. Please welcome Chapman Hyatt for us.
Hey,
Oh, hello Chapman. How are you?
good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. So welcome to the Journey NYC podcast. I think you've heard of us before, considering that you've been stalking us and commenting all over the place.
Been your number one fan.
Yes, absolutely. So which is why we're having you here.
Well, I was wondering how long it would take for me to get on here.
Well, you look very different from when you were a child star.
I was 16.
So how many years ago was that?
12 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So 12 years ago, you were. How did you get your start?
Well, I was always ever since I was super young, I was acting. There's a story that my mom used to have. At 2 years old, she took my brother and I. We were playing with these Winnie the Pooh dolls, and she's like, "Let's go play in the 100-acre woods." And then immediately I was making stories as soon as I was able to.
It sounds like your parents, or at least your mom, was very creative and encouraged you to have that sort of creative outlet.
Super. Yeah. On my mom's side, my grandfather was a poet. My mom was a sculptor, and my grandmother's a portrait painter. So super artistic on that side.
Are you a sculptor?
I just don't sing. That's the only thing that I don't do.
Okay.
Yeah, so don't ask me to. I think people will probably pay money to not hear me sing. That's the one thing.
You heard it here, folks. Chapman's going to be doing his karaoke debut today here at the Journey NYC podcast. And if he's not doing that, he will definitely be doing Zumba for us.
Two things no one wants to see me do.
Anyway, so how does that manifest?
It's definitely a ton of acting. It's writing.
Okay.
I'm writing short stories, screenplays, wrote a play. I've directed a handful of times, but not as much experience with something like that. I danced as a kid a bunch. I did jazz, tap, and ballet for 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and really loved it. So I still try to be as physical as I can.
So why do you not Zumba?
It's just not in my breadth of experience. Just not something.
The hips don't lie.
And then when I was 9, through my community theater, we had an agent come in from Los Angeles for child talent. And out of 150 kids, she chose my brother and I and a third person. So we got an agent in LA when I was 9, and we were back and forth between LA and Colorado between January and February for 3 years for pilot season. So I was auditioning for features, for pilots and TV commercials. And then when I was 13, we lived there for a full year. But that was the year of the writer's strike. So I got a whopping 3 auditions that entire year because there was no work. But I was there for a year.
Sure.
And then I went to boarding school outside of Massachusetts.
On the other side of the United States.
In the complete other side of the country.
Okay.
So I lived in Colorado, California, Massachusetts, and I was also staying with my grandparents up in Maine to just save, if I want to get out of the school, I could go visit my grandparents up there. But right before that happened.
This sounds like a Nancy Drew mystery.
Yeah.
I'm going from Massachusetts and Salem.
Yeah, just trying to find a mystery clock.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole time.
In Maine, somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right before I went to boarding school is when I got Lemonade Mouth, which was the Disney Channel movie that
was a musical. There was a band in it.
I was the band manager. So again, not having to sing or do any music, I was helping them get the music out to everybody.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you did Lemonade Mouth, became a child star, and then what happened?
Went to boarding school very promptly after because my mom was like, you really need to get just a good education. I know it's something you want to do, but she'd been to boarding school. Everyone in her family had very East Coast. So she was like, I really want you to have very good education. Did that, got to NYU, was in the Tisch BFA program.
Okay.
Graduated 2017. Went back, been in New York since then. Went to LA occasionally just for some gigs out there. But it was interesting just because it was my whole childhood, right? Was just acting. And so there was a time in which I was like, do I even want to do this? Like, is this something that I want, or is this something I was like pushed into doing? So there was a time in which I was like, now that I have the decision to do this, do I want to do it? And also around that same time, right before I graduated college, my mom passed away from breast cancer.
Oh dear.
She had it since I was really young, since I was like 9. So
wow. Okay, so it had been a constant.
Like, she'd get it and then she'd go into remission, get it, go into remission, and then we had a stretch in which it looked like she was in the clear, and then it turned around.
Because after 5 years, they consider you not cancer-free, but like in the safe zone. Yeah,
she was never quite 5 years. Like, it was like 3 or 4 years, and right when we get our hopes up that it was remission, we'd get another diagnosis.
So one of our guests from podcast, if I'm not mistaken, is with Tracy Kuba. She actually was episode 6. Had a really rare cancer, and she was just about ready to hit her 5 years, and she just we found out that she just had a relapse. So she's again through chemo and whatnot. So it feels like that, that's why the 5-year mark is there.
And that's not even a guarantee. Like, it's there because it's super unlikely, but it was always breast cancer. But what happened was they found a lump in her scalp the 3rd time.
Oh.
And we were just like, this can't be, because she's had breast cancer the entire time. But what they found is that it was cancerous, and that there was some dispute whether it was breast cancer in her scalp or a different form of cancer. So right when we were still trying to figure all that out, she really took a dip in health, and a nosedive. And so.
And you're how old at this point?
I was 22.
Wow, that's a lot to deal with.
Yeah. And that just happened really quickly. Like, around Halloween of my senior year of college, she got sick. Thanksgiving, I went home. It was bad. She went to Texas to go to an institute down there, to a hospital. And then we first got news that
the Mayo Clinic.
Yeah. Okay. And at first we heard that she's got sick. That she's going to be fine. Then it was 6 months, and then literally, like, I got a phone call the next morning saying that she was going to pass away that day. So it went super, super quickly. Like
wow.
So then got to Texas, and she's already passed away by that point.
Oh.
I'm in the middle of I'm in a show. I've produced it. I cast it. I'm putting it up in Manhattan. So I'm only in Texas for 2 days before I go and I do the show.
Wow.
And then right as soon as the show's done, we have the service in Colorado. So it was tumultuous. So it was definitely, and then after, she was a big part of me acting as a kid. So It was like, after she's gone, is that still something I want to do? Is that so closely tied to her that it was kind of painful. So it was kind of just like, anytime because I was still in school, still acting, and every single time I'd go up and do something, it was hard to do. So I was like, is this still something that gives me any joy, or is it just a painful thing that I keep doing over and over and over again?
What's interesting is actors, and I spent a good 18 years acting and doing theater and whatnot. Do you find that, and we talk about heartbreak, and we talk about what drives an actor and where they pull from, and the depths and the research that they do, and it's all of the things that happen in our personal life is sort of like that well of information that we draw from. Do you, and I get where you're saying, like, I don't know if I can do this. Do you think it was just too close to it? Because in one side, I look at it, I'm like, well, that's great. Now you can channel grief. You can channel, the overwhelm. You can channel so many different emotions from that. But at the same time too, is if you've not gone through the healing process, then it is literally just too overwhelming. It's like, I have zero joy from this. This really sucks.
It's just raw. Like, you don't know how to use it very well. And it was just not something in my family to talk a whole bunch about and no one knew what to do. You know what I mean? Like it was so sudden that it was kind of like, when I went to therapy because a girlfriend was like, I think you should go to therapy. And I was like, nah, I haven't been through anything. Like I was like, everything's like, considering what other people had been through, I was just like, I don't really know. Like, and also it was strange because she'd had it my whole life. So it was kind of constantly in the background, but when it happened, it was like, oh shit, this is actually something that this is a real thing that can happen. So going to therapy was sort of unlocking a lot of years of just living with it that had sort of culminated up. So that was a complicated thing to kind of piece together. So you're totally right. You have to heal a little bit from it first, because if you're still trying to use it and you're this close to it, then the work's actually not very good, because you can't really
differentiate,
and you can't take care of yourself in a way that like makes it something that you have. Otherwise, you're just sort of like, how I felt was just a raw nerve all the time. And then I have no consistency. And that's still a big part of what you want to do with this work. It's not just like, let me emote all over the place.
What's so interesting is when and I actually think you're the first actor that we've actually had on this episode.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Well, no, you're not. Karina was a singer. She was episode 8, I believe, but
you haven't had any Zumba instructors or anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
You're going to be the first.
Dang.
Okay.
I'll get my certification.
Yeah. But I actually think that it's going back to my original thought is, it's not just a separation and that healing that you need to go through, but sometimes I can also see, and I speak from my own experience, is not necessarily that, someone passing away in death is, you sometimes dive into something else to try to cope, because it is so raw and painful. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I can see that in acting, it could be an escape, because you literally get to live a different person. You don't have to deal.
Yeah.
But I think for you, is what you're saying is that it was particularly raw and particularly painful.
Yeah. It was just something that felt like my whole identity was just that, was like being an actor, just because you do it from before an age where you're like, I don't know who I am, but I am this. Like,
you were Winnie the Pooh in the Thousand Acre Woods.
Yes. Or I was in Lemonade Mouth. Like, it's just like certain things you craft your whole personality around. And then once you don't know if that's who you are anymore, then you have to just be like, okay, like, who am I besides the things that everyone's identified me as and I've identified myself as? So it is just to be like, it felt like a grief of, a mother, but also just like a weird feeling of just like, all right, well, what do I do now? Like, how do I move forward from this? Like, I think you've been a really important figure in all that too, because you said to me, like, I think it actually built your character.
Are you seriously just calling me a mother? Wow.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. The first slap down insult right in my face.
Not an insult. Like, definitely, like, you came into my life at a great time for that, because it was like a year after it had happened, pretty much.
Yeah, we met in 2018. Like, wow. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize it had been so soon.
Yeah, it was December of 2017, and then I met you, I think, in the very beginning of like August of 2018. Yeah.
One of the interesting things, and I say this because I understand what sudden death is like. Mm-hmm. So, and it's interesting because you actually had this from 9 until, going into 22, you're in school. For me, as my father passed away when I was 10. Mm. And I was the last person to see him from my family, because for whatever reason that evening I had decided to camp in my closet. That was a thing I was into at the time. Mm-hmm. So I had, like, over the clothing wrap, I had the blankets and propped up with, stuff, and I was camping. And I definitively remember is my father opening the closet and goes, "Rhino, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Camping." And then I went back to sleep. Mm. And then, but for whatever reason, is I woke up and I jumped on my bed and I looked out the front window and I saw his car drive away. And then later on that that morning somebody called. I was up, so I answered the phone. My mom, said she had to go to the hospital and whatever. And like a few hours later, she came back and said that my father passed away. And I remember overnight, like your life changes. And it's different, obviously, as you're older, because we understand death, I think, a little bit more. As a child, even today, as I live with it as a 10-year-old sees it. I don't ever see it as an adult. Because that's all I remember. Like, I remember, the things that I remember are definitive to a child.
So, you're still like a 10-year-old grieving about it. Like,
yeah, but so much of my life, and the reason why I brought it up was because for me is I coped in avoidance. Because as a 10-year-old, I don't know how else you like, it's if you say your family doesn't talk, my family really doesn't talk. So it's like you grieve in different ways, and it's like where I come from, it's like, oh, you're the man of the house, and it's like, how do you tell that to a 10-year-old? You know what I mean? My mother made it a fact, when she said that she made it a point to tell all my relatives, and I don't want you ever telling him that. But it's not that I didn't hear it. She just was very clear that she told everyone, but it's not that I never heard it. It's like you would hear, like, when the neighbors, they'd be like, oh my God, you make sure now you're the man of the house, you have to take care of your mom. And so it was like, it's a lot to put on a kid that I don't think anyone realizes. Generally, things change, but I think it's so interesting to hear someone's perspective as someone who's older, because I only have one perspective.
You've just got, and it's weird too when you see that everyone in your family is going to grieve a little bit differently. Like,
our second episode was with Geraldine Cooper Smith, and she talks about what it was like to go from zero to death. But that's as an adult, and the grieving process that you go through. I think for you is what I find so interesting is how you now have turned that as a child actor. How do you now turn that into your superpower?
You have to be just really patient. Like, you have to wait for it to be the thing that it's supposed to be, because I think something that I noticed that I do and definitely still do is that I'll like be like, okay, now I can like use it, but I'm not really ready yet. Like, I'm still like, there's still stuff I haven't like resolved with yet. So you have to let things be whatever they're going to be. And you don't know what that looks like until it's basically happened. So what it does is give me the perspective on just being like, all right, this may suck right now, but who knows what this could be if I take care of myself and I give this thing the space it needs to breathe. Like, it's a good, I don't know why I'm saying I'm looking at the plant, but it's the same thing. Like, you let something kind of grow and tend to it, and then maybe it can be something kind of beautiful later. Like, I look back at that and I was like, I don't know what that meant. I hate the expression, like, everything happens for a reason. Like, but that's what everybody kept kind of saying. And I still have trouble kind of thinking about.
Well, because I don't think anyone wants to think about pain as you were meant to feel this, at any point. Like, I don't think, I don't want to, if I think about there was a reason, like, I'm grateful as an adult today that my father did pass away, because when he had his massive heart attack, he was alone in an airport. No one had found him for, X amount of time. So like, my life would have been infinitely changed. I don't know if we would have been in the house, because he would have needed 24-hour care all the time if he had survived. So but I don't think I would wish anyone to be like, there's a reason why. And I'm sure eventually we learn these things. I think for me is like one of the biggest things I learned was I had learned to bottle it and compartmentalize it for so long that I didn't know how to. The only time I would channel it or allow myself to go there with real emotion was when I was in theater. And it was why I was so good at it. And I could read from, across the stage. The difference is that I couldn't access it at any other time. like, because I didn't know how to.
Yeah.
Like, I just, Yeah. So I find that for you, I find it so interesting. Like, you were a childhood star, you went to school. Now what's going on?
Now it's like finally as if I'm come on the other side of sort of like a shadow. Like, it feels like it took me like 3 or 4 years to just be like, to think. And then the pandemic was actually one of the best things that could have happened, because I got to go back home and spend time with my dad. And then when I came back to New York, I was like, no, I really do love this thing. Like, I'm miserable when I'm not doing it. Like,
Okay.
like and what I did is that I was like, you know what, if this is something I want to do for the rest of my life, I'm really interested in the idea of, like, I taught it during the pandemic. Like, in my hometown, my friend had started a theater company, so I was teaching it to like high schoolers and people just out of college.
Great.
And they all figured out about Lemonade Mouth, so that was and that's like the perfect demographic, because
If you want to see Chapman in an entirely different persona, check out Lemonade Mouth and see if you can figure out who he is, because it is quite a lovely performance.
So you want to tell me who the hell this guy is, huh? What the hell am I supposed to do with you?
What do you care?
Oh, no. You are in no position.
Oh, what position is that, Dad? Huh?
Never talk back to me like that again.
Whatever.
I'd let you use your mother being gone as an excuse for your sorry-ass behavior. But you know what? She's been gone for a year now, so you better get over it.
and I'll get some royalties out of it too. I'll get $2.69 or something.
Absolutely. That's why I keep playing in the background.
Constantly. And so I was like, I really love teaching this. So what I wanted to do was get an MFA, and I went through Brown. I auditioned for Brown's MFA program literally just a couple weeks ago. Got to the very good. I mean, just a really good experience of just doing it, prepping really, really hard, going there, and I made it to the very last round of callbacks, and
Congratulations.
did not get it, but like went to the very, very last round and felt really good about the work that I had done, and still didn't get it. So it was strangely another repeat of grief, where it was just like, oh, like it was still a disappointment. And it was interesting to revisit those same feelings from like 6 years ago of like, oh, I still I'm not immune to this. Like, I'm still feel grief for something, but maybe my coping mechanisms have changed. And now I know what my comfort movies are. I didn't know that before.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and then I really like chocolate. So it's just some of the things you learn.
Ah.
Yeah.
What is a comfort movie?
You don't know what a comfort movie is?
No.
Oh, it's a movie that you watch when you're feeling sad. Like, it's just like, this is the thing that makes me feel like
Like something that plays in the background, or you like pay attention just to make you cry?
either way. Like,
it's a release valve.
yeah, it could be something that makes you like weep and feel like, oh, I feel so much better. Or it could be just something silly. Like, you know, for you might be like, you know, the Golden Girls or something like that. Like, I know that whenever I was like sick and here, you'd play that. And I was like, this is something that Anthony watches when he's sick. Like, something that gives you pleasure when you're not feeling great. It could be something idle, or it could be something whatever you want.
I mean, for me, it's something humorous and mindless that can go on in the background.
Yeah, like that's all it needs to be.
Yeah, you know what? That's true. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and it was something where I was like, if I want to do this again, I know what the experience is like, and I can go back and do it again next year. But it was also just to be like, let me try doing this again. Like, let me try acting again, and let me see how it is. And felt really good about the work that I was doing, and was just like, all right, like at the end of the day, if I think that if I believe, like Morgan Freeman has a really good quote, which is like, if I believe me, you don't have a chance. Like, if he believes what he's doing thoroughly, then they don't have much of a choice, the audience, in terms of whether they believe him or not. If he believes it, then you've done your job. And that was like, well, I know that I can make something that I believe in, and that makes me happy. Like, not necessarily, it's nice to obviously get recognized and like accoladed for something, but like, it's a worse feeling to do something and be like, oh, I didn't believe me at all. Like,
Sure.
your bottom line is to get yourself to believe yourself.
That's actually really powerful. I never thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm. And then I try to apply that to everything too. Like, I try to. I'm not saying I'm always successful. But I try to as much as I can. So.
Well, I think we all do. I mean, so, is I think one of the biggest and the hardest things about acting is it's not always the talent that's not there. Mm-hmm. It's you're the wrong size to be an understudy. You're too short because the costumes are already pre-made and they're not easily altered. Like, there's so many different things that can, or we need, if you're gonna, this particular role has, especially in theater, it's this particular role has to cover X other things because this is the way the track they've marred this track to be. Mm-hmm. In film, it's a little different, or a lot different. It was one of the hardest things, and it was also the thing that exhausted me. Mm. I got tired in theater and in acting of, how in acting and in performance in general, you look for authenticity. Mm-hmm. But in that world, it's also so short-lived. Yeah. It is, you are my friend and we are buddies for this moment. Mm-hmm. And now that we're out of the show, it's like we don't call, we don't talk, we're on to other things. Like everything that just happened for a year or 2 years or whatever just becomes sidelined. Yeah. And you sort of forget about each other and life goes on. And then the interesting thing is, but then if you see each other, then it's like, it's just like, hey, how's it going? And you just catch up. But then I always felt like, I was like, well, what happened to the 2 years where we were like best buds? We would walk to the theater together. We would walk back. We would do, what happened to all of that? Yeah. Like, what do those relationships really mean? Like, yeah. And so like, it was really hard for me, at least where I was at in my life. Cause the connection that I was looking for and that authenticity I was trying to find for my own self to put out there. But then I found it lacking in that department. It was like, yeah. And that was hard for me. To not get that reciprocated. Like, well, everything was so fast and fancy. You know what I mean? It's like, like that's kind of the best and worst thing about it is that like you look for those moments that are like teeny tiny little moments where you're super connected, or like your co-star, it's like you get it, you got it, yeah, it's great, and then they stand out in your head, and then you're like, all right, well, the rest of it is also just life. Like, people seek it because those moments are so elevated, yeah, and they're things that we remember for years. That of course they attract people who are just seeking something that's kind of flashy, and if that's not that thing, they'll get bored and possibly move on. Those people you don't spend a ton of time with. But when you're like touring with them, you don't have much of a choice. Like, I get that that's frustrating. That's just one of the things about touring a show where you're locked in with who you're locked in with. Yeah. But also just knowing that, like, when it comes to me with it, I never get tired of it. Like, there are certain things that I've done that I was just like, I do really like this, but I definitely have like a wall that I hit where I'm like, I'm exhausted, and like I can't draw on any other well of energy to do it again. Whereas like acting, it feels as if like that well is so much deeper that I'm just like, I don't ever get tired of talking about it or thinking about it. So that for me was just like, that's probably a sign that this is something that I should do for the rest of my life. Great. Yeah, not Zumba. Not that. So if Zumba is not your career and singing is not in your future, so now that you made it to Brown, for whatever reason you felt really good, you believed in your performance, unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. Now what? Now it's like, let me just hit the New York scene as hard as I can. Like, I had a manager right before the pandemic, and I was like, this isn't working out. So left her, getting a new one. I'm doing a play at the New Ohio in June for 2 weeks. New Ohio is it's an off Broadway theater company that's been around for like 30 years. That's about to close down in August. So when I got an opportunity to do something there, I was like, I'd love to do that before it closes. Okay. Doing that. We just filmed something in May that is about to be released, so it's finally about to be finished with editing.
So hopefully there's like a film festival circuit that goes along with that.
I literally feel like the YouTube channel that's like Hot Ones, where it's like, now you survived the gauntlet of chicken wings. It's like, tell everyone here, tell them what you got going on.
I look a lot more like Sean Evans though, like between the two of us. Yeah, like that's, and really just getting either an agent or a manager and just being like, hey, look, like I've been doing this ever since I was like 2 years old. Like I took a break from it to like heal, and now it's just like, just literally put me in, like you can just see how hard I work at this and how good I am. I just want to show people now.
Great.
Yeah.
So tell people, okay, so in June, where are you going to be able to be seen?
At the New Ohio Theater, way on the west side, June 1st to the 18th. It's Merchant of Venice.
Oh.
It's Shakespeare.
Wow.
It's very fun.
That is very different.
It's half modern, half the classical text of Merchant of Venice. It's not a...
Thou art hard to understand.
It's the first time I've ever heard you say Shakespeare. Interesting. That's
because apparently there were no Asians in Shakespeare's day.
Oh, well.
According to them.
He wasn't perfect. There should be more Asians in Shakespeare.
Yeah, well, who do you think did their laundry then? Sorry, Grandma. I'm kidding. No, I mean, I get it. It's so then if you were to leave work, like it sounds like you're progressing and now you're looking for an agent. Tell me a little bit about what you would say to people who are wanting to be in this, because I think part of these roles, and we saw this year, Adam Rich passed away, who used to be in 8 Is Enough. There's a lot of these childhood stars that start, they do things, they don't really go further than that. Or they blow up, they do one thing and then they never do much else after that. But I also don't know if they know. I think as a child, you think that, all right, I have all this talent and I'm going to continually get all this attention. However, as we get older, we change as people. Our skill set changes, the industry changes. What the industry wants is different. It's like leading man character, whatever that is. What do you tell to someone, and the kids that you're trying to inspire in the next generation? Because you've gone through it. Success, not so successful. Success, not so like what do you tell them? Because what people see when I think they look at the industry is they see only the stars that have succeeded. Yeah. They don't see the downside.
Yeah. And a lot of actors will I've been one of those actors too, where like you look at when our actors really, the ones you like, struggled a lot, and you really empathize with that. Like people love the stories of someone who wasn't given things, but worked hard to get them.
Well, like Brendan Fraser was like gone for forever.
Yeah. Or like Everything Everywhere All at Once, like that actor who was he was in and he did Indiana Jones, and he was also in The Goonies, like short round, and didn't get work for a long time. So it was sort of, and then when you think about it, it was sad. I was like reading this thing about the old Peter Pan animated movie.
Yeah.
Based on this child actor who was like blowing up, but then he got older and it fizzled out, and it was a sad story for him. So there's plenty of those stories. I think you gotta really like know who you are outside of that, because unfortunately, like when you're a kid and you do it, you are like, this is the best. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot of attention. You're just playing pretend. Like it's a dream. And But then you just sort of realize that like there's a whole other world that's not that. That's why you also see a lot of actors leave it, because they're just like, that was my childhood, but like that's as an adult, this is who I am. Like don't think that that's all of who you are, is just a child actor, because that's such a fleeting thing that people will not, as soon as you get old enough past that age that you're really cute and adorable, all of a sudden it's like people don't want you, and you take it personally, and you think that like it's something that you're doing wrong, when it's not you. It's like they sought out a cute looking kid, and once you're not that anymore, of course they're not going to treat you the same.
Sure. What do I do? What do we do with you?
yeah, just know that who you are has value outside of this system really seeming to care about you.
You know, it's really interesting because whether people realize it or not, from being a child to a teenager to a young adult, your body is a specific way, and then your body changes. You know, we see it in sports too, right? Recently, there was this whole thing about females ice skaters, and should they be able to compete because they're turning quads at 15 and 14 because of the fact that their hips have not broadened.
Yeah.
You know, these female skaters can turn faster because the centrifugal force on the way that they turn with the structure of their body at the time is better than when they are older. It is harder for them to rotate that quickly, etc. You know, you look at all these things and you realize that that's also true for everyone. Brendan Fraser said that when he was Tarzan, he was literally just starving and he looked amazing, but he was also fighting his genetics. Yeah. You know, and so like, I always find it interesting when, you know, there's this physicality, and I'm sure like there's this new Jake Gyllenhaal movie that's coming out. But it's so interesting to me because the judgment is always on physical and sometimes not. That wreaks havoc on a person's self-esteem, their confidence. And sometimes it's just the genetic cards that you were dealt. Yeah. And that's what's interesting.
Yeah, if you look at Lemonade Mouth, I had this giant afro of like curly brown hair. And that's what everybody wanted me to go in, was the cute, adorable, or like pretty nerdy like kid, you know? And then
Note that he says pretty nerdy.
Very nerdy.
Lemonade Mouth is what you need to see.
Yeah. I'm being generous to myself like at a young age. And then you get older, you know what I mean? Like I knew that at like 20, I was like, I'm not going to have hair for the rest of my life. And because I saw on my dad's side, I saw on my mom's side. And I was just like, is this something that's going to affect what I get casted in? And I was like, yeah, but to be honest, I never loved having all that curly brown hair. I always looked like a cherub. And I never thought people took me very seriously because I looked a little too pretty. And I was kind of just like, and also the roles I liked were like kind of just meaner. Anyway, like I really liked those, like, and I want to be taken a little bit more seriously. And if I going around looking like Cupid all the time, I didn't think that it was going to happen. So, that's not the case for everybody. With some people, it's just like, okay, like the same guy was talking about the Peter Pan thing. He had terrible acne. Like that's why he aged out, because you go from being a child to all of a sudden puberty hits you and you've got terrible, and it's 1950 something, so nobody wants you. So.
Well, and no one knows how to treat it back then.
No one knows what to do. So I hope that we're all sort of moving in the right direction with things, but also like there's more variety of roles out there. Like Brendan Fraser couldn't have done The Whale 10 years ago. Like it's the kind of thing now that it's just like, I think that it's great that there's just more variety of roles to pick and choose from, and you've got to place somewhere. You know, it's a big industry.
Yeah, I think that's cool. So what's on, besides this Ohio theater, what else is on your plate? What are you doing currently to make ends meet? Are you writing?
I am writing. I'm in personal training.
Cool.
So that was something where I was just like, I've been such an intellectual kid that I was just like, let me do something that like, and all that helped with the grieving too, was just being like something that I can feel some kind of release from was physical exercise. So that was a way to make ends meet.
Wait, so you're saying that personal training is intellectual? I've never heard someone say that.
No, I'm saying it was.
Expound on that.
It's in its own way. It's like, because I was kind of just I was thinking in circles a lot and just I still do that, but it was like I need to find something that is some kind of release, because I think I was thinking a lot about how to grieve and like not letting myself alone. Like, I'm not saying it's just a distraction, but I actually, while doing some kind of physical exercise, have been like on the outside at the end of it being like, oh, like I had an idea about something, because it's not necessarily a distraction, it's a release. So you get a little bit of clarity about things. Like that to me was like, oh, that was a big breakthrough, actually, just finding that for myself.
That's cool.
And then writing a pilot, a feature, a short story, a selection of short stories, and just submitting them all the time.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we will look forward to seeing Chapman Hyatt's name up in lights or in print
Somewhere.
or somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Just not on the
Just not on a subway car.
or on a Zumba class. Just like, not a hoopty.
Excellent. Well, Chapman, thank you so much for stopping by for episode 17 of the Journey NYC podcast. It's been really interesting hearing about your journey from, Walt Disney all the way on to currently what you're doing.
Yeah.
We wish you the best of luck. And of course, if you audition further, for Brown University, I think you said,
Mm-hmm.
we wish you the best of luck. Thanks a lot.
Very much. Thanks for having me.
Come here. Let's get a close shot.